Hi, everyone. If you're just joining us, it's lovely to see how many people are gathering here today. And we are excited to see some familiar names from Ohio, Georgia, Maryland, Virginia, Texas, Pennsylvania, and DC. So I'm sure we will get a chance to hear more from all of you in our chat box today. So if you could familiarize yourselves with the chat box. There are also some handouts in the GoToWebinar. For me, it's a gray little tab. And again, that's just a reference for mostly after the call that if you wanted to implement any of our activities at home, you could download it there. And I'm also going to launch a poll right now so we can learn who is joining our call today. I know many of you wear several different hats. You may be primarily, I guess you might answer primarily if you're joining us as a teacher, a parent, or other. And you will get a chance to tell us your role and a little bit more about you. And we're just thankful you're all able to join us and healthy and safe. And we will be joining in just a moment to think about oral language. Okay, good afternoon, and thank you again for joining us. And just so we can think more about who's on the line, we see we have about 78% teachers joining us primarily in their instructional hat, and then about 9–10% of parents. So then we have a few of our Cal colleagues, and thank you for joining us. Some of you, I suspect, are also wearing the parent hat, and then other. So we'll have to hear who our other participants are. Feel free to join in our chat box. And as a reminder, you can write to everyone by choosing that in the chat box. So here we are with our webinar, and we're planning to do a series of these. And right now we're thinking about those who are at home, and we're thinking about oral language development in the home and the opportunities we have to work on those skills with your children or students. So we are, sorry, I'll just return back. We are joined by a team of presenters, and also if you'd like to join us on Twitter, we are tweeting at the Cal Langlit and the Center for Applied Linguistics handles, and you can look for more of that in the chat box and use the hashtag #LanguageApplied. So you are all muted at this time. We actually don't have audio capabilities, but do look out for the chat box where you can add in a message at the bottom of your screen. For me, it's a gray box like this, and you can chat to all, or you can chat to individual panelists there. So now my colleague Maribel is going to join us for some introductions.
Hi everyone, we're having a little bit of technical difficulty. Annie, we can only see the quick poll and not the PowerPoint.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Hi everyone, hope that, you know, in this time where people are uncertain, we're all under a little bit of stress, you know, we have different feelings about what's going on and ideas, understandings. So we thought that just for a little fun, we would ask you to think about all of your thoughts and match your current feeling or status to a Smurf. So we're going to visit the Smurfs. And if we can move on to the next slide. Which one of the Smurfs best represents you? Are you a Papa Smurf, always taking care of everybody else? You're the voice of authority and reason? Or are you Handy Smurf, always trying to find a way of fixing things? Maybe you're Smurfette, you know, the maternal one, the one that takes care of family, finds beauty in everything. Or maybe you're brainy, the one that really needs the facts, needs to know what's going on, you know, the why behind everything. Are you the current resident expert? Are you grouchy? I love grouchy because he gets irritable and angry, but you know what? By letting off steam, he's the most human one of the Smurfs, I think. And what about our last one? Are you jokey? Always having to make everybody laugh, taking your mind off of others and what's going on. So we as a team thought about this and we came up with some of these. So my name is Maribel Marrero Colon and I am pretty much jokey Smurf because whenever anything goes wrong in my family, anybody's sick, anything's happening, I'm the comic relief. What about you, Kate?
Hi, everyone. I chose Alchemy Smurf because right now caring for and educating my kids, as well as keeping a balanced and happy family and working full-time from home feels a little bit like alchemy. Maria, how about you?
Well, I'm definitely more like Handy Smurf because I have a lot of resources and I have my handy dandy hot glue gun and crafts and markers all the time with me.
And hi everyone, this is Annie Duque again, and I chose to be Nature Smurf. So that's one that I made up, and there may be a Smurf like that, I guess. And the rules are very open with the Smurfs as far as I understand. So I chose Nature Smurf because I am looking for joy and calm in nature, especially now, but always, and I also love ladybugs. So how about you? We want to hear which of the Smurfs represents you. We have some examples here, but you can really make up any Smurf that is according to how you're feeling or what you've been doing during this time. You can use the chat box, and please also let us know, what your role is and where you're coming from. We'll take a couple minutes in the chat box. Okay, folks, I see that people are using the questions box, so I don't know if our chat box is currently working, but I also do see some responses over in the questions box. I see a number of Smurfettes. I see Brainy. Handy Smurf. Some are feeling a little bit guitar Smurfy, anxiety Smurfy, brainy Smurfy. Someone online from Santiago, Chile. Sometimes jokey. Okay, also, thank you for all your participation. I see a lot of different roles you're playing. Some of you are speech and language pathologists. I see English learner teachers. I see some school psychologists. Okay, so I'm going to let my colleagues answer some of your questions in the question box, and we will move on, but you can continue to add your questions or chats in that box. But I will also go back to see if anything looks similar to this chat box that we showed you in the beginning. Here, so this is what it looks like for me. There's a chat function. And the questions box is a little bit more for if we want to answer those questions, I think, for the whole group or technically, but we'll use whatever works. So right now we're going with the questions, and maybe we can sort it out for next week. So we'll just keep moving on. And thank you for being part of our Smurf community this week. And we'll move right into our agenda. So we did our introductions, and we're going to look a little bit about oral language development as a building block for literacy, and the reason why we chose this topic so that it would be of particular use and thinking about the opportunity for people while at home with your families and also perhaps virtually with students. But primarily we're focused on the building blocks of oral language that we have right in the home with our own families or housemates. So we have a couple of activities that we'll share with rich oral language opportunities, and we'll also have some students, two of Kate's children who are home with her this week, who have been participating in some of our activities for us. So in some of our workshops, we have some content and language objectives or targets. So those are, we split them apart to think about what is the language purpose that we're focused on here today. So the content we're working on here is creating activities to promote social interaction and language development in the home. And then how will we do that today? We will be talking, so mostly for you, you'll be listening, and also chatting. So that chat box is going to be, or the question box in this case, you will be primarily writing or typing it in. And we hope to promote some oral language between whoever's participating with you in your home today. So those are our goals. When we think about oral language skills, oral language can be both social and academic language. And of course, most of our days, whether they're spent in the kitchen or driving or watching media or in the classroom, a lot of our days actually are taken up by oral language. And to be honest, it's something that in schools we don't have enough time to spend on oral language development. So there's some of the research out there shows that in an hour, students might produce as little as 30 seconds of talk in a very traditional classroom setting. So it's a great opportunity to develop students' oral language while at home. And as I said, oral language, including vocabulary. So vocabulary is a big component of oral language and language in general. But oral language predicts reading comprehension outcomes. So it's a great skill to build as a foundation. And along with word level reading skills, oral language is one of the foundations for advanced reading comprehension. And oral language development in one language is transferred to a second language. So if you're speaking in Amharic or Spanish or French, Korean at home, that will also reinforce your oral language skills in English or a third language, an additional language, like Polish. And what is oral language? So oral language comprises several different components. And one of them is phonology. Those are the individual sounds or syllabic level discriminating sounds of a language. So often that's early language development is student thinking about the sounds of a language. So rhyming is that's why nursery rhymes are so great for younger children. Morphology, the units of language, the parts of a language, so prefixes and suffixes. Here we have The word float has a meaning, and the suffix ing has a meaning here. Flower has a meaning on its own, and the plural s shows us that it's more than one flower. So these are word parts that give us meaning. Vocabulary. So some words, if we're thinking about this image, might include petals, leaves, roots, lily pads, but also words like observe, general academic words, or on top of. The flower is on top of the water, or the flower is on top of the leaves and stem. Grammar, we might think of the structure of a language. So the plurals, the ed endings for past tense that in English. And we might also think about in English, we say the floating flower, but in French, we say une fleur flottante. So the adjective comes after the noun. So all of those structures of language that can be moved around in other language, that's the grammar element of oral language. Discourse is a little bit of a higher level. So for this flower, we might imagine a story where a frog is trying to jump from lily pad to lily pad. And so you would tell a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Or I might have you give a very technical explanation of how the flower manages to float. I might have you list gardening supplies that you need at the store. So those are elements of discourse. Pragmatics. Pragmatics is the last aspect of oral language. If I say you want a garden, then you might think that was, you might have a certain meaning there. But if I said you want to garden, what does that difference mean? How do you interpret it now? Maybe dad usually doesn't like to garden, so you want to garden? Usually mom does the gardening. You want to garden? So really, you want to garden? Does that have a little bit of a different meaning? You want to garden? That might mean that maybe you want to watch a movie or go for a walk. So thinking about the different pragmatics of a language and how challenging it might be if it was a second language. These are all aspects of oral language. Language learning is social learning. So as we think about these conditions for oral language development, these are true at home and at school. So language learning is social. That's how we learn our first language, whether it be, again, French or Arabic, but it's also how we learn a second language. And it's most effective when the environment is supportive and adapting, when there's lots of rich materials to work from, word banks, or lots of rich discussion. In terms of the next one, it's meaningful, purposeful, authentic. So there's more to talk about when it's a higher order of thinking. When it's more engages your critical thinking, it creates more language. So if we just say, what's the capital of Virginia? There's not a lot to talk about. Language learning requires both comprehensible input as a theory of second language acquisition. Comprehensible input is providing language just above where the learners are. So the teacher here is using words and gestures to provide comprehensible input to the students. He also chose a text that's best fit for his students. So the teacher here is providing comprehensible input towards the learners, and the learners are listening. That's the oral language skill that they're using. And here we have a student who's speaking to the other students. So the other requirement for language learning is language output or production. So we're thinking about lots of activities for speaking and listening in our webinar today. So let's try one, and I think we're going to have to use our questions box again if the chat function is not working. So what we're going to do today is an activity called List Group Label. And we do this in our workshops and sometimes with teachers. But what we're going to do is I'm going to give a topic, and each person should add 4 words related to the topic. Okay, this is going to become our list. You're going to write 4 words or phrases you know about this topic in the chat box. And the topic we're going to do is called community. Okay, so what does this word community mean to you? And you can use the chat box, the question box, and you can answer in any language. So in French, I might say communauté, and for community, the 4 words I might think about are together and group. Okay, those are 2 examples. Communauté, I could say ensemble, meaning together, right? So you can feel free to add in any language. We happen to speak the 4 languages there, but we can take responses in any language. And my colleague Maria is going to pronounce the word community in Spanish and Polish for us.
So in español comunidad, and in Polish społeczność. Jesteśmy tutaj wspólnie.
Thank you, Maria. Okay. Everyone can enter in the question box, and we'll do our best to pull from there 4 words related. And if you have 2 people at your computer, you can come up with 8 words or more. We'll give you a couple minutes for that. Okay, everyone. So thank you for bearing with us. I understand that you cannot see all of your great responses, so I'll do my best to read some of them to you. So we have a great list, though, rest assured. This community has come up with a lot of words reflecting community, and some of them did it in several languages. So I will now do the next part of our activity. So we made a list, right? Everybody contributed, and we made a big list. So we're going to show how we might do that in the classroom as well as at home. We're going to put them together, okay? So, well, sorry, you just put them together. You can't see it, but I can see it. It's a big list, and I'll share some of it. And we're going to group them. I'll get your help on that. And then we'll add labels as the last step, okay? So it's list, group, label. I'm actually going to come here and make this as big as we can. Okay, so I'm going to start typing in a few of the words and telling you them. And you can start putting in a question in the question box, telling me where they might go. And I might get some help from my colleagues. So I see the words collaboration, communication. I'm just putting them in different places, but we might move them around later. So I also want to alert you to these sentence stems. The blank, and blank could be in the category that. You could sort the blank and blank together because, okay, so I have communication, but I also have comunicación. Okay, and I have, okay, together. I'll put that here, but you can tell me where to move things. I have group, family, jobs. I'm just entering them in first. neighborhood, community helpers, service, unity, love, compassion. So I'm probably putting things in the place where purpose. I'll get a couple more. Friendship, amigos, interaction. I'm going to put vecinos, barrio. Okay, so lots of different ideas. And now, if you could help me, we are going to group some of these words. So we came up with a lot of words. And if you could help me group them, how would you group these words? Maybe one of my colleagues can unmute themselves as I add a few more and think about how would you move these around? Mari? Okay, so I'm going to move jobs. Maybe jobs will go down here in service and community helpers. Although I also know we could group that as, okay, the camaraderie of your colleagues or jobs. Unity, love, compassion. I might.
How about activities? Okay.
Which ones would you sort as activities?
Collaboration, communication, camaraderie.
Okay. I might do a label here. Types.
People.
How about community responsibilities? To give service, provide jobs, work as a community helper?
Responsibilities, I like that one. I also had, what about values? And we might add together here. It's not gonna let me do that. Okay.
Well, how about with that long group you have, types of communities, where you have family and village, but you also have together, group, family, neighbors. Maybe those two should go together.
Maybe since I moved together down to the other, I can move this whole, right?
Because that's types of community.
Maybe I'll move policía to responsibilities. Where would you move purpose? We could also make that a label. Okay. Okay, so it doesn't matter which ways you group them. You also might want to look at alternative ways of grouping these words. It's really about the conversation. So I bet that a lot of you at home are thinking, oh, why are they labeling it that way? I would do it completely differently, right? And that's sort of the point, that it would inspire a lot of conversation about how to group these words, but really we came up with some great words together. I see other words like security and resources, connectedness, and mutual, and vecinos, maybe we had that one. I see other languages represented, socialize, classroom, that's a great one, right? We could do this completely differently based on the location of it, right? And that's the point. We could keep regrouping, or different groups of students could do this apoyo to help, knowledgeable. So many great words on this list right here. I'm just, Ohana, thank you for representing Hawaii. So Lots of great words. German, I see so many representations here, and hopefully we can get that saved in our to share out after this webinar. So I'm going to move on and let Kate show you how she did this at home with her family, a little bit differently, but same idea, list group label.
Yeah, so we're going to walk through a couple of activities that you can do with your family and kids of all ages. We tried this list group label at home with objects. And so what we did was each family member had a couple of minutes to go and find, we did 5, but between 4 and 6 different objects from around the house. And then we brought all the objects together and put them on the coffee table in the living room. And then we worked together to talk about how they were similar and how they were different, and then divide them into groups, and we created labels for them with little strips of paper. I have some pictures to show what we did. So this picture, my kids are 5 and 7, by the way, kindergarten and 2nd grade. So my husband and I and the kids all gathered our objects, and they're just piled in order of the people who pulled them. We didn't group them yet. So we brought all our objects together, everybody talked about what they brought, and then we started to categorize them. So if we look at the next picture, you can see my son's hand on his woolly mammoth, and my daughter is starting to write some labels on the strips of paper. What was really great was we had some really good discussions about what made these objects similar and what made them different. So we started out sometimes with a lot of categories. My son started sorting objects by color, so he wanted to make a blue category, but then my daughter started looking at purpose and function, and so then my son was like, oh yeah, you can eat some of these things. So we came up with a category of things you could eat. And then he brought a lot of toys with him, so and my daughter did too, so they wanted to make a toy category. So as we started separating things, we noticed that there were some objects. It was the lunchbox, a ball of yarn, and hand sanitizer, and a scented candle that they had without a category. So we started talking more about those objects. Well, is there anything that they have in common? Is there another way we could look at grouping some of these things? And my daughter said, well, the lunchbox is made out of fabric, and the yarn is used to create fabric. She said, maybe we could have a fabric category, and then we can put the woolly mammoth into that category. So then my son and daughter had a negotiation about whether the woolly mammoth was primarily a toy or could go into the things made of fabric category. Since she's more of the writer in the family, she won because she wrote the label. But the idea was that the two of them were thinking more deeply about how things fit together. When they were looking at what was left, which was the hand sanitizer and the candle, my son noted that they both have really strong smells. So we created another label for things that have strong smells. So in the end, you can click to the next slide, and we have the list of how we labeled everything. So we had 5 groups. One group was of edible things like Girl Scout cookies, cooking oil, crushed pepper, flour. Another one was types of tools, which started out as a category of sticky things. We had the tape and the glue stick in their own category, but then we collapsed that into a bigger category to include the hairbrush and the pen. We did have a toy category with some Magnetiles, Lego, car, and a toy camera, and things made of fabric or things made to use fabric, like the plush woolly mammoth, the soft lunchbox, and the ball of yarn. And finally, the strong smelling things category, hand sanitizer and a gardenia candle. So it was a lot of fun, and they had a lot of discussion. This is a great one and an easy one for you to do at home. We're going to look at another more traditional example of how we use list group label in the classroom with words. So if we had the topic of weather, we could brainstorm a list that might look something like this. And then we would work together to try and sort these words into different groups. And the groups might look something like this. We might put rain with hail and windy or wind. We might put snow in that category or sun. So as we come up with categories, they look like this. And then as we're looking at how these words fit together, we might think about what the labels for these might be. So we might have types of weather, accessories or gear that you might use for different types of weather, adjectives, these are words that are describing the weather, and tools like thermometer, which is used to measure the temperature. Another great activity you can do at home is an information gap. And this is where two people or two groups have different information and they have to work together and talk together to fill in the gaps. So this one was about animal habitats that I did with my kids. And so to start with, they each got a sheet that had some sentence starters on it and some game pieces. And they started by coloring those sheets. Then we also glued them into a manila folder so they could set it up kind of like Battleship, where they wouldn't be able to see what the other person had. They cut out these little game pieces and we put a small piece of painter's tape in a little roll on the back and stuck it to the top of the folder, the part that's standing up. Then on the bottom of their folder, they each had a scene, and these are where they're different. So partner A has some animals on it, and partner B has different animals. And then the little game pieces that they cut out and taped to the top of their folder are the ones that they're missing on their game boards. So they need to ask their partner where the other animal is. So for example, partner A needs to ask, what is the bird doing? And then, or what is the bird doing? And partner B would say the bird is soaring above the mountain, for example. And then partner A would take their little game piece tape with the tape on it of the bird and place it above the mountain. So I tried this with my kids and we're gonna have a look and see how that went. Here's a quick video clip of my children towards the end of this activity.
Sorry, folks, I am muted, so I have to play this. I will have to start it again.
Zara, what is the frog doing? The frog is sitting on the log. Okay, but the only log, this is the only log, so I know what log to put it on.
Okay, so you can see from this short clip that they were using questions to ask each other where different animals were, and then they were responding with a location. They also had a lot of follow-up questions if they weren't sure, like if one of them said that, you know, the groundhog is under the tree, there are 3 trees in the picture. So they would ask for more information to try and find out which tree it was. In the center, you can see a picture of them comparing their game boards after they finished so they could see how close they were. They had a lot of fun, and the thing I loved about this activity was it was very easy to set up and it took a long time. Like they were able to color for a while, they colored their game pieces, they cut them out. It takes kids a long time to roll tape, so they were doing that. And they had a lot of fun. They really enjoyed the activity and they had to ask and answer questions. So they were really using oral language, which is wonderful. And prepositions of where things were and how to describe where something is. So it's a great activity. It is in your handout, so you can print it out and play it with your own family. If you have older children, it is Women's History Month this March, so they might even have some background knowledge on this. We have included another information gap about famous women. So this front page shows the sentence frames that you can use for this information gap activity. What was blank's occupation? When was blank born? Why is blank famous? And where was blank born? These are the bits of information that are filled in on different sheets that we'll see in the next 2 slides. So for person A, their game board would look like this, and they would hide this from person B. So they have some information about all of these people, and they need to ask those questions using the sentence frames we provided to be able to fill in their chart. Person B's game board looks like the opposite, has the opposite gaps missing. We also have created some bingo activities to use at home. Some of them are better for younger elementary kids using Brain Pop. So these are in your handouts. What they're going to do is listen, review the key terms that they need to listen for. This is primarily a listening activity. Then they're going to watch the video clip. For the older students who are okay with watching the news or who have been watching the news, they could use the news segment for news bingo. They're going to listen for key terms and then pause the video or pause the news when they hear or find the key terms to fill them in on their bingo sheet. At the end, they can compare their answers if they're doing it with a sibling or a parent, or you could provide them a prize if they're able to fill in their entire card. So for early elementary, we've done a bingo based on Brain Pop on Community Helpers. For elementary, we've used Brain Pop on Georgia O'Keeffe. And then for upper elementary, it's based on current events or watching the news. And Brain Pop right now is offering free registration while schools are closed. So that's a great resource.
Okay, so, there are a lot of activities we can do with family and friends. Sometimes if grandma or grandpa or the aunt and uncle are watching the kids or a babysitter while we're going through this, or as in a lot of families, mom and dad are juggling the kids back and forth. So there are a lot of fun games that are educational as well. So for example, a picture challenge, where you pick an object in the house and one person has to describe it to the other one who cannot see it, and that second person has to draw a picture of it. There's a lot of heritage language lessons out there, but also things that you bring from your own culture, like oral stories, that kids absolutely love. And not only do they listen to the oral stories from the family or read stories, or just talk about things that come from their heritage, but they can add to it. There's the old, the oldie and the goodie as far as 20 questions, I Spy. So, and we have the what's in the sock and the headbands that we want to talk to you a little bit about. So our next slide shows an activity that I grew up with that I totally loved. I mean, we spent hours playing this when I was a kid, and it starts with the classic I Spy. So you have on the left the I Spy with my little eye, something that begins with the sound, and you start with the initial sound. And of course, kids look around and take a look at all of the things in the environment, in the neighborhood that start with that sound. Well, in Spanish we used to play and we called it veo veo. So in this one, there's a little bit more discussion at the beginning. But the thing is, Spanish is learned through syllabication. You learn to read through the consonant sounds. So if you're learning the letter M, you would have ma, me, mi, mo, mu, because you would have the syllable sounds. So when we played veo veo, it was veo veo que ves, una cosita con qué letrecitas, asking what are the first letters, con las letrecitas. And you see here the me for mesa, or the table, the ga for gato, or even at the bottom, the gu for guante. And it's a lot of fun because we spent hours just sitting on the porch, learning the sounds, but at the same time having a lot of fun trying to stump each other as we went along. Another game that we can play is what's in the sock. So you literally go find some socks that, you know how you're always losing one sock in the laundry? Well, grab the one that's all by itself and put things in it and just ask the kids, what is it? So what does it feel like? What does it smell like? Luckily, through socks, they can smell. And so they really have a lot of fun touching, guessing, working around it, and really using all of their senses as they're going on. And for very small children, this is a really great game, and they can make socks for the parents to, or their caregiver, to figure out what is it that they found in the house to put in the sock. So it's a lot of fun, and it also takes up a lot of time when you're working with kids. And if they're a little bit older, kindergarten, first grade, we can start writing those words out on a piece of construction paper or on a whiteboard. And so they start connecting their senses with specific words. And that really works well. Our next game that we have here, and some of you may have played it, there's a game Headbands, where you have a band, or if you don't have headbands, you can just write it out on a piece of paper and use a piece of tape on the forehead. And the people in the audience, or the other students, or the parent, or whoever's in the house, describes the word, and the person wearing the headband, who cannot see the word, has to guess it. Again, it's a lot of fun. The kids really start working on their everyday vocabulary, and as the kids get older, you can add that academic vocabulary in there so that they can start. So for example, if students are given the topic of chemistry, let's say, so we can have middle school kids playing this, and a student has the word proton on their forehead, then the questions can include, like, am I found on the periodic table? And everybody would say yes or no. Am I smaller than an element? Am I smaller than an atom? So you keep working down until they say, am I a proton? And everybody celebrates the fact that the word was guessed. For older students also, there's the old-fashioned password. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I love the game Password on TV. And the way it works exactly the same way, except that it is for older students, and they face each other where they pull a card out of a deck. And in this case, it's the person who pulls the card that tries to come up with the different meanings. So for example, the person can say, okay, this is a math term. And the other person may guess is an equation. No. This word is part of a whole. Oh, it's a fraction. And so they can keep working with it as they go along. But it works really well. Along the same line as for word games is the good old-fashioned 20 questions. Now, I'm not going to read this whole thing to you, but you can take a look and see how each player picks a topic. They pick a noun, a person, place, or thing, and then the participants or the players can ask up to 20 questions each to try to figure out the topic. And as you go along, you see that at first it starts with the yes or no's, and then it gets more elaborate, and the students start using critical thinking skills. So in this case, it was the family cat, and player one at the end really congratulates and celebrates that player two figured it out in 9 questions. So it's a lot of fun. Again, it's a good way to get older kids off the video games and actually working and talking to each other, or talking to us. As we go through our next activity, it's critical thinking in the kitchen. Let's say kids are helping with the chores in the house. Well, we can ask different questions and get them to really stop and think. It could be something as easy as, where is the baking powder? Where can you find the ingredients? Pulling out, like Kate was talking to us, that she'll pull out a kitchen gadget and ask the kids, what do you think this is for? What's going to happen if I take baking soda and vinegar and put them together? And you can try it out and see the explosion, since that's the basic ingredient for creating volcanoes in school. How do you say pancakes in the native language, for example? or French, Polish, German, Spanish, Amharic, Korean, or Arabic? How do you bring the foods that they're looking at right now into the native language? And what if you're speaking in your native language? Well, then you can ask the student, do you know how to say this in English? And bring it back and forth, because the more we bridge two languages, the more elastic the brain is and the more the students get out of it. You know, and then you try to give them those harder questions where they have to figure things out. Like your last question there, your secret ingredients are, maybe you give them 3 ingredients and ask them, can you create your own recipe using these ingredients? So you get a chance to really have the kids think about something that's everyday, but you can get them working at a higher level and actually thinking critically, which we really want to do. Now, for our next slide, we want you to stop and think about it. So, Kate, can you help me out with this?
Sure thing. So like many of you, I have my 2 kids at home, and I'm looking for ways to use, stuff we're doing all the time to increase our educational time. And I think we're all looking for ways to do that don't require a lot of extra prep. And it's fun. You can do these things just naturally, these games and these activities, to increase talking with your kids and increase their critical thinking on stuff that you're doing anyway. We went for a walk the other day and we worked our way through the alphabet looking for things that started with different letters of the alphabet. And so we had a lot of back and forth about whether, does that actually start with a C or does it start with a K? And of course, that's something you can do in any language. Some letters are trickier than others. We got to Q and we're struggling. So my son took off really fast on his scooter and then turned around and said, that was quick. So we got our Q in. Another thing we've done, we've been doing more baking and cooking together. So kind of like that last slide with the baking, critical thinking and baking, I've just tried to increase their talking during the process and thinking of it more as process oriented rather than the end destination. Usually as a parent, I'm so crunched for time and trying to crank out dinner and get it on the table so we can get to our activities, get to bath, bedtime, all of that stuff. But one thing I've noticed being home is that we have a little bit more time and the kids can be more interactive. So instead of rushing through that process, I've been involving the kids more and asking them questions. So you can expand the critical thinking with recipes by, getting out measuring cups and looking at fractions and asking, how many ingredients have we used so far? Oh, we added 3 cups of flour. How many do we have to add total? And they can start thinking about that. Well, how many do we have left? Or can you find, I'm looking for something and you could describe the ingredient. I always put them on the table. Well, now I'm looking for something that's white and kind of fluffy. Oh, is it flour? No, it's sweet. Oh, it's sugar. So there's lots of ways to just increase the talking time and increase the thinking. What do you think this ingredient's going to do? Why are we adding all our wet ingredients before the dry? Why do you think that is? And I don't have to have the answers for them. The important thing is to get them negotiating and talking and using language and thinking through ideas in a way that's fun and interactive. So we want you to think now and contribute to this conversation. Which activities would you like to adapt and use from home? And what are some other ideas you have that you have been using at home? Do you have resources and language-rich activities that you've been engaging your kids in that you would want to share with our group? So take a few moments and put them in the question box or the chat box, whichever you have access to. And we'd love to hear what you have to say.
thanks for all your ideas. I have been responding to a few of your comments over in our questions box. And I think when I respond to them, they go to everybody. So I'm looking out for those. And I had to laugh about the sorting laundry or the sock game, because I know that my mom used to post a advertisement early in the week, like let's say a Tuesday, for a sock jamboree on the fridge, and she would put prizes, games, so much more, you know, make it seem very fun. And then she would dump a large garbage bag of our unmatched socks and see how many socks we could assemble. So I have fond memories of our sock jamboree days. So I'm going to give another couple minutes while I can respond just with quick answers to get them out to all of you. So I hope you can see them as I just add some quick responses to send all of your ideas out to everyone. Okay, so I have hopefully thrown out a few more of your ideas in terms of creating puppets or a garden, a scavenger hunt. And I know some of you are thinking about how to put a lot of these online as you're building your instruction for your students. And so we chose to make this webinar specifically focused on oral language, to think about kind of where people are in terms of, you know, thinking about the opportunities we have to build those critical oral language skills in the home. And there's lots of ways we can build that and transition it to literacy. So next week we do plan to do more focused on reading and writing skills that we can work on, and also not only for parents, but also for teachers. And so we'll continue our discussion next week, same time, 3 to 4 p.m. And you can continue to add some of your ideas here, and I'll continue to respond. I believe at the end of the webinar, it'll ask you for a couple questions around a topic that you would like to see addressed next. So if you're thinking about virtual instruction and looking for tips on that, we can certainly do that as well and incorporate that. So I thank you very much. I know we are all glad to be part of this community. And next Friday, March 27th, you can register directly. You'll also hear it through all the channels where you heard about this one. This time we'll have a little bit more of a heads up. So thank you very much for your participation, and thank you to my colleagues for